Hey guys, Tom here. Welcome back to Throwing Wrenches Garage. And we're here today to do a little bit of work on the Chevelle. And I say a little bit of work because it's not really heavy duty stuff, but it's the first opportunity that we've got to work in this nicely, newly refinished and bright garage. I'm actually working here with the door down, so you're not going to hear the sound of leaves rustling or cars driving by outside, which might be kind of nice. What we're going to work on today is installing sway bars on the Chevelle. So you guys may recall several episodes ago we installed some new control arms into the Chevelle, some new parts from UMI, which I mistakenly called UMI several times in that video, embarrassingly. It is in fact UMI. This is the problem sometimes when you buy stuff off the internet these days. You can't just screw up in front of the parts counter guy and have him correct you. You just continue to mispronounce the name, and so you say it in front of several thousand people, and then you find out you were wrong. So be it, there we are. So it is UMI, and I did just buy a sway bar kit from them, front and rear sway bars. And part of the reason that I did this is because all the bushings are completely shot on the front sway bar, and there is no rear sway bar in this car. So I just decided to go ahead and get the full kit and get it all converted over. And the reason I'm doing it today is because, frankly, I moved these sway bars probably 24 times while we were cleaning out the garage, and they are not fun to move around. This is the front sway bar. This is a big mamma jamma. These things are heavy, not exactly a featherweight piece to move around, and I'm sick of moving them around. So we're gonna install them on the car instead of just continuing to relocating them from one spot to the next within the garage and the basement. So we'll get that installed. That means we're gonna have to remove the front one that's on there today and put the new one in, and then we'll move to the back where there is no sway bar and just throw the rear one in. And along the way we'll tell you what I know about sway bars, which could probably fit in a thimble, but maybe it's more than what you guys know, and we'll go from there. So come along and join me. The first thing we got to do is jack this puppy up, get it up in the air, and start to take the front sway bar kit off. So I'm going to try my darndest here to light this thing up for you guys. Who knows how well that'll work, but we'll try it. All right, so this is what we got going on. This is the sway bar right here. That's a sway bar bushing. This is the front sway bar. And that's transitioning into the sway bar end link. You'll notice that the end link looks nice and new. That's because it is. And that came with the A-arm set that I got from UMI that we installed earlier this year. So I need to take that end link off so that I can get that sway bar end disconnected. Then we'll go ahead and remove the bushings. There's two bushings, one on each side of this bend here, and then we'll take the end link off the other side. There's an identical one over there, and then we should be good to go. So these are just 9/16 bolts that are holding these on, so should be relatively easy to remove. The way this particular sway bar end link works is that the whole thing threads into this receiver. So you got to take the whole thing off. It's just one big bolt that goes into it. There we go. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to leave that out like that. I'm not going to bother disassembling it until we get the whole thing out, because when I go to reassemble, let me just pick this back up for you to see. When we go to reassemble this on the new sway bar, that I get this sandwich as close to this as possible. So no sense in disassembling this whole thing here. We'll just do that once we get out of the car and we got it on a bench. It's a lot easier then. So now it's onto the bushing. And for this one, let's go a little mechanical here. Well, fortunately, it's not rusted 6 ways to Sunday. That's nice to see. But that's pretty beat up. That can't be great. Kind of glad I'm replacing that. And when I'll show you guys when I get this out, but the new front sway bar that I've got for this thing is way beefier than this thing. It might be technically roomier to work in this garage now. I gotta be honest. With all the lights I set up for you guys to be able to see, I do not have a lot more room to work. I guess that's the price you pay. Hope you guys appreciate it. I'm just going to leave that like that. That's very close to just falling out. Don't want it to. And then we'll just go over here and remove this end link. I'd rather not have this thing fall on my head. There it is. That's completely loose. Still need a bit of a spin on the bushing. And then this whole thing should come crashing down on my forehead. And she'll be lovely. Oh. This is like a toothpick compared to the new one. It's like a twirling baton compared to what the new one is. Where do you guys see this?
Except you won't see this, because Cecil B. DeMoron over here was not hitting the record button when he was showing you the 2 different sizes of sway bars. So I'll just tell you now. The old sway bar was a stock 1-inch round steel sway bar. The new one from UMI that we're installing is 1 1/4 inch. So in fact, 25% bigger than the old one that we pulled out. Quite a bit beefier.
So I told you that I'd tell you what I know about sway bars and how sway bars work, and that it would fit in the thimble. Get your thimbles ready. So basically the way that the sway bar works is it's a torsion bar. It's just a big piece of spring steel. So it's a very, very heavy spring steel, but it works as a torsion bar. It wants to stay straight, but it's under a certain amount of tension. So once you mount it underneath the car, it's mounting to either side of that wheel axis. So in the front, you're not actually on an axle because the wheels are independent. On the rear, you are on an axle. The way that it's mounting to that, it's wanting to keep things straight. So as you drive, and as the body rolls as you take a turn, one wheel wants to sort of dip while the other one wants to sort of come off the ground. Well, that torsion bar, that sway bar, it's going to resist that because it wants to stay flat. That's why it's got sort of a U-shaped bend in it so it can go and hook into that front end. So it wants to keep things flat. So it's going to help resist some of that body roll so that you won't have so much body roll as you turn the car and shift weight from one side to another. That anything you can do to calm body roll means that you're going to have wheels that stay, or tires that stay in better contact with the ground. Better contact with the ground means better traction means better power, better steering, better braking. So all of those things are good and we want them. So that is why we want that torsion bar, that sway bar on the front of the car, on the rear of the car. We want that to happen. So in this case, we're going for the bigger one from UMI. This is an upgrade over what you would have had as stock. And the reason that we're putting this on is it's really what's available to us in that kit. Frankly, we could have gone with just a stalker and put that back on and it would have been fine with new bushings. But bigger is better. That bigger means you've got more tension. I would argue that it's probably, I'm no engineer, so it probably isn't a linear scale. There's probably, one of you guys will comment on this, but by my math, 25% more spring to this. So that arguably means you've got a little bit more resistance to that body roll and a little bit more power to help keep this thing straight. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take the sway bar end links off the old sway bar, transition them over to the new sway bar, and then we'll get this thing installed with its new bushings. Now, you might be asking yourself, why did I use the old sway bar end links? Good question. The kit did come with new sway bar end links. These are nicer. These have sort of a turnbuckle style. It's a much nicer sway bar end link, so I'm going to try to use these ones. The geometry on this bar is a little bit different, so if it doesn't work, I might have to go back to it. But right now, that's what I'm going to try to use. If I can get this puppy up over my head. Honestly, this feels like it's going to be a little bit of a bench press. So these bushings are split bushings so that you can get them around the bar without sliding them over the end. And then they go into these little cup holders. And these particular ones happen to be greasable, which is sort of nice. So we're not going to tighten anything just yet. This is sort of one of those tips and tricks I've learned the hard way. Get things sort of locked up in place before we start cranking everything down, because you never know what kind of adjustments you're going to have to make. Oh, hey. Why didn't you guys tell me that was backwards? Son of a gun. All right, look at this. There's a real moron move. Take a look at that sway bar end link. That little brass bushing is supposed to go next to the nut, not next to the sway bar. What a moron. Now that's got to come off. What a maroon. Oh, crap. What a pain in the neck. So now the whole reason that I did this thing outside the car to make it easier for myself is now down the drain. Way to go, Tom. You're the best. That's probably pretty good for now. So the thing about suspension components is you don't really want to tighten everything up until you get it down on the ground under its own weight. So we'll snug up for now, and then we'll come back and readdress everything when the car is under its own weight off the jacks. All right, there we go, that's snug. Now I'm gonna run that up a little bit tighter. Just like we did on the other side. So by tightening this thing up, effectively what we're doing is we're putting that tension on the sway bar. We're creating that sort of portion, that spring, that's actually going to make this thing work. Without this thing being tight, then there's no tension, there's no spring effect, and effectively this thing doesn't work. So it's got to be tight, it's got to be under tension in order for it to work properly. And then you can tune in how much tension it's under to dial in how much it's going to respond and how much it's going to work with the car. Now, I'm not going to pretend to you that I have any idea how to tune it. I really don't. One of these days, I will read something or watch something on how to get an idea of how to tune it. But considering that I don't do any auto crossing or anything serious with it, I really don't think it's going to be too big a deal for me in my daily driving and my crazy, neighborhood slaloming. I should be fine. I gotta say the garage is already paying off. It's like, I don't know, it was 50 degrees outside when I came out here. And just from doing a little bit of work in here with a hoodie, I am completely comfortable, which is not the way it would have been before we insulated it. So I'm pretty happy. And it's plenty bright in here too, which is another big plus. All right, so now, let's see, bring you guys back under here. So we're just kind of checking for clearance issues now. We just want to make sure that everything is clearing under here. Most particularly, I'm interested in making sure that everything's going to clear here around the idler arm. And it looks like it will. It's all clear. Nothing's going to get in the way there. It should be fine. I don't think we're going to have any problems. There's a slight possibility that we could get some bang-ups there when that's loaded, but we'll see. Once we get the car down, we'll be able to see if that interferes, but I don't think so. I think what's going to happen is that once the suspension gets loaded, this is going to twist down, not up. So I think right now it's in the worst position it's going to be in. So I think we should be okay. So we're going to go ahead and grease the bearings, the bushings, not bearings, and let this thing down. All right, so maybe this makes sense for front. This was pretty easy. The whole thing for me took me about an hour and 20 minutes, all told, and that's including me setting up lights and stuff, which you guys don't have to do. So that's pretty fast. This is not a huge job to do, and that's with taking an old one out and putting a new one in. Fortunately, this thing was not gunged up with rust. Nothing was stuck. Everything was in pretty good shape, so it wasn't too hard to take out, didn't give me too much of a hassle. Now we're gonna move on to the rear, which ought to be even easier because there is no rear sway bar in this to take out. That's the next thing that I want to talk to you guys about. Now the rear sway bar looks a little bit different. This is a much simpler U shape. We don't have the same sort of extra curves. We don't have sway bar end links that go on this one. This is a much more basic shape. This is going to attach directly onto the lower rear control arms on the rear end assembly. It's a pretty basic attachment. It's really just 2 bolts and nuts on each side. And because I already put in the lower rear control arms on this car a couple months ago, I know the holes are already there. I know the mounts are already there. This should really be a fast thing to get in. I really just have to jack up the back of the car a little bit, get these things into place, snugged up, drop the car, and then tighten them up, and we should be good to go. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit about why on earth you would care about having front and rear sway bars. I care about having a rear one, and I'll tell you why I noticed that I didn't have one before I even knew that there was none back there. I could feel the back end of the car slip out on me around corners, especially when you go a little bit harder around corners. The reason for that, as I understand it, and again, there's smarter people who watch this channel who might correct me and might, even better yet, be able to show some evidence and some details as to why this occurs. But because the sway bars are actually helping to cancel out that roll, or at least soften that body roll a little bit, if you only do that on one end, on one axis, one wheel axis, and not the other, it's actually going to impart a little bit of a body twist into the car, which is definitely not what you want. You're going to get an imbalance. So if you don't have a sway bar on the rear end of the car, but you do have a sway bar on the front, then the front's going to stay a little bit more calm. Those front wheels are going to stay in contact, and the rear is really going to, in a more exaggerated way, not stay in contact with the ground, and you're going to feel it sort of slip away from you when you're cornering. And then inversely, if you don't have one in the front and you do have one in the rear, you're going to notice some front end issues, some steering issues, potentially even braking issues, as the front end really just does not want to stay settled on the ground. Obviously, that gets even more exaggerated if you have bad springs or bad suspension in any way. So you definitely want to make sure that you do have that balance, that if you've got a front sway bar, that you have a rear sway bar, and vice versa. And try to get them matched up as much as you can. You don't want the craziest, beefiest sway arm in the front and then a tiny little spindly thing in the rear, vice versa. Try to get them matched. But it does go a long way to helping kill some of that body roll. And that's especially important on a big old heavy muscle car like this one. There's a lot of weight sitting on this car and a lot of weight to impart on a body roll. You want to make sure you're killing as much of that as you can. So off we go. Let's get this guy installed. All right, hopefully you guys can see this. I've got 2 little holes right here. Those are the holes for my bolts for this sway bar. So let's start getting things going here. Give you guys a nice way back look there. So we do have a nice bag of bolts. Let's see. So we've got bolt, washer, nut. So we'll get a couple of these ready. I do know from reading the instructions, I did that even though it hampers my creativity, that we do bolts going in from the outside in, and the sway bar is on the inside of the control bars, and UMI does a nice job of putting these stickers on here. So if I had any question of which way is up on the sway bar, the sticker answers that question. And I didn't really have a question. It's pretty obvious from the shape, the way it goes around the differential, how it goes in here. So it's not too much of a trick to figure out. So I think the easiest way to do this is one bolt on either side, and then we'll kind of pivot. All right, this is actually, oh, I don't want to jinx it. We're pretty easy so far. At least pretty simple to follow. Oh, that's not a 5/8. Or is it? That's a 5/8, but the nut is not. Oh, I hate it when they do this. So the bolt is a 5/8 bolt, but the nut is bigger. Ah, God, I hate that. I got my heavy dose of simple on the front, and now I got bitten by it here. All right, clearly we have reached the end of the capacity of that little ratchet. So we'll have to go by hand. Not really much room to get an impact in here, so let's do it the old school way with grunting. That's it, guys. Bob's your uncle and all that. She's done. That was like stupid easy. All tightened up. This one, I'm going to drive this a little bit before I come back and snug these up again. I think it's pretty good. I think I'm going to drive it around a little bit before I go back and torque these down again, just to make sure that they're in solid. These are real tough to reach while the car is down under its own weight. So I'm not necessarily sure that I can get to that while it's under its own weight. So we'll give it a little bit of time to rest itself up. And then we'll try it again. Just torque it down just to make sure they don't work themselves out. But that is in, and we're a wrap there. I don't know what to do with my hands. I feel like my sign-offs are getting very predictable because I'm always standing here with a wet wipe cleaning up my hands while we go through what just happened, but so be it. Maybe this is my Mr. Rogers changing his shoes and putting on his sweater moment. So that's it. We're done with the suspension. I've already decided that I'm not going to run a video when I do the upper control arms in the back of the car. It's a nightmare to film that. It's horrible to see. It's really tough visibility and camera angles and lighting. And quite frankly, not a thrill to see in the first place. It's just going to be me with a lot of swearing and air hammers. So we're not going to film that. So I'll spare you guys on that one. So for what you guys are going to see, that's it. Suspension on the Chevelle is pretty much done until I get to a point where I put air shocks on it, not air shocks, coilovers on it, but that's not going to happen for quite some time. So we're good. And I'm now pretty happy with where we sit now with suspension. I can't wait to take this out for a drive. It's pitch black right now because we already set the clocks back. So it's after work, so it's like 6:10. So it is dark. I don't feel like driving this in the pitch black, but it's supposed to be, I think, decent tomorrow. So maybe a drive to work. Maybe that'll work. Well, yesterday it was still a little bit too dark to take the Chevelle out to road test it, check out if these sway bars are working. But you know what? It's a new day. And today it's going to be about 70 degrees. And even though I have to go into the office today, I think we're going to take the Chevelle out to work today. All right, so join me on a little ride to work. We'll see if this thing's handling better than it was. Now this first section of my road is just straight, but it's bumpy as all get out. Sway bars aren't going to necessarily help with the bumps really, or at least I'm not going to notice them. I'm not sensitive enough to it. But what I am noticing, a lot less noise. The bushings were so blown out on that front sway bar on the old one, that I think I was getting a lot of rattling noises from that when I was going over bumpy roads before. It's a lot quieter now. So that's a distinct improvement. Makes me feel a lot better because this thing was awfully noisy going over bumps and bumpy roads for having basically an all-new suspension. I mean, the sway bar was really the only thing that hadn't been changed out up front. Definitely noticing on these turns at the end of my road, sort of gentle S's. I'm not taking them under a ton of power, but the back end's not trying to scoot out on me like it used to. We get a pretty good turn up here that we take with some power. So let's see how this goes. Oh my God. Oh my God. It's like night and day. There was like no roll to that at all. This thing handled that like a champ. I just cornered right around it. I was not expecting that kind of an improvement. That was pretty amazing. All right, I'm convinced. Sway bars for the win. That was pretty stunning. Seriously impressive. That cornered really well. And even here at a sort of a low speed turn where normally I would have had a considerable amount of body roll and I would have felt it, did not feel it going into that. That's really surprising. So there's a testimony to you, at least from me. I'm convinced if you've got no sway bars or dinky sway bars on your car, and you've been putting it off or thinking it's not a big deal, think about it, my friend. get some sway bars on that puppy. They're not terribly expensive, and man, what a difference that has made in the drivability of this car. It's a huge, huge difference. I'm stunned. So we're all set now with the Chevelle. That's it for this episode. We're not sure what we're doing next for the Camaro. To be perfectly honest with you, we're sort of in a little bit of a spin out here with what we're doing with the Camaro because we haven't taken the engine out of the Chevelle yet. Hesitating on taking the engine out of the Chevelle until I get the new engine crate motor on order and until I'm 100% sure that I'm done driving the Chevelle for the year, which is coming up very, very close because we're getting to the weather that I just won't drive it in. So once I have that new motor on order, I'll be ready to take the engine out of this one. So probably within a matter of weeks. Once that happens, then we can actually start getting to work on converting that 350 over so we can get it in the Camaro. But in the meantime, I'm kind of stuck for what to do. So I'd love to hear from you guys what you'd like to see us do next on the Camaro. There's still more to do here. We've got brake systems that we need to go over. So we need to replace a lot on the braking system. We're going to go through and overhaul the front brakes for sure. Some new flexible brake lines, some new calipers, rotors. That's a great job to bring Declan through because he's never done a brake job before. That's something we have to go after. New suspension is something we have to go after on that. So some new struts because those things are pretty toasted and pretty old. Is that something you guys want to see us go through with Declan? Because I think that would be interesting for him to get through. There's still some bodywork issues that we can go through. I do have that pin welder that we're going to be able to use to sort of pull some dents. That's another thing we could go after. And I'm also going to go after Declan too and see what he really wants to do next because we've been charging after the stuff that's on my list. And I think it is time to sort of double check in with him and make sure that we're going through the stuff that he really gets interested in and he wants to do next. And I think that's important. We may even have him start to do some of the stuff that he wants to do on his own, some smaller stuff, and maybe just have him run some shorts and some Instagram videos and stuff like that of just him cleaning up parts, which is some of the stuff that he likes doing. So tell me what you guys want to see in the comments. As we get into the winter months here, it gets a little bit harder to figure out what to do. So we're interested in hearing what you guys would like to see us doing next. We'll take all the ideas you have and we'll see what we can do about spinning them into new episodes. So until we see you next time, enjoy yourselves and keep on throwing wrenches, guys. Thanks for watching.